evening all. In 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, rule number 6 is set your own house in perfect order before you criticise the world. And he goes on to talk about the 1920s serial killer Carl Panzram. Panzram was one of the most ruthless serial killers of all time, a man with an unbridled hatred of the human race and existence itself. His most often quoted phrase is, "I wish you all had one neck and that I had my hands around it." And I was reminded of Panzram when I heard about the shootings in Christchurch, New Zealand a few days ago. And I'm going to follow in the footsteps of other commentators and not name the killer themselves. And although I didn't see the video, I am aware of the details of the video, but I have read quite a bit of the statement that he gave, the manifesto that he released before committing these crimes. And there were some similarities between what he was writing and what Panzram said as he made his testimony in jail, and with statements made by the Columbine shooters some years ago. And rather than attributing this just as an example of white extremist terrorism, that's the current narrative, or that this is just pure insanity and madness, it is, but not in the way most people in the mainstream media are describing it. For me, knowing that this person planned this attack for years and worked out the details, his manifesto makes sense of somebody who has devoted themselves to this one act. In fact, the one thing that Peterson says about Panzram's murders is that he isn't some kind of random nutcase. In Panzram's mind, everything is extremely logical, extremely well thought out. Everything has a purpose. And that's what I see here in this case, the same kind of attention to detail and analysis by the killer in preparation for this act. And his stated intention, is to create a civil war in Western civilization. And so far, what he has done, the commentariat, the mainstream media, and the blue check marks on Twitter, amongst others, have fallen for his trap. They are carrying out actions and saying things that this killer had anticipated. They are following his lead, and I'll give you some examples. This person is so clued up on, as people said, on online discussion, on online talking points, bullet points, the hot button topics of recent years, incredibly well clued up on the culture wars. And he has done things to trigger the various hotspots of the culture wars as well. He has targeted Muslims at prayer, and he has used guns to do this. He also had explosive devices that he was prepared to use, but the firearms was the way he was going to do it. Because on the one hand, you have got the target victim, a group of people that many on the progressive left see as a victim group, and he's used the weapon that will enrage the progressive left. He had explosive devices. He could have used them in a small area such as the mosques and achieved much the same carnage and destruction. But by using firearms, he is well versed in the culture war. That is the thing that's going to set the commentariat off, that he used weapons. And of course, immediately it's talking about gun bans, more restrictive gun laws. But he was saying things in his manifesto and in his video, again, to touch on the hot button issues in the culture wars, in order to trigger responses for the people watching. This was as much as an atrocity, a tragedy, a brutal crime. For him, it's a performance piece. So he name checks PewDiePie. Right, subscribe to PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie is a kind of buzz phrase that's been going around for the last few months on the internet, because there's PewDiePie, the lone individual YouTuber, going up against an entertainment corporation as to see who can get the most YouTube subscribers. So that's all a very kind of innocent thing. But he says subscribe to PewDiePie, and it starts triggering things. The Daily Mirror in the UK printed a piece. It was on the Daily Mirror's website, where they say they print PewDiePie's reaction to these killings, where PewDiePie is sickened that his name has been used by the killer in this atrocity. He's sickened, and he said, his thoughts, prayers, and good wishes go to the victims. This is decent stuff from PewDiePie. But the Daily Mirror can't help but by going controversial YouTuber PewDiePie, who has allegedly come under criticism for controversial Nazi remarks or his use of the N-word. They can't help but dredge that stuff up. This is what the killer intended. Name-checking someone who triggers the progressive left and the mainstream media. Likewise, he name-checks Candace Owens. Now, Candace Owens is a black conservative commentator who's risen through the ranks, mainly through the internet, online engagement. Now, the killer also, in his manifesto, says that he is a white supremacist, yes, and he hates conservatives. He hates the mainstream right. So here he is, sort of name-checking, not in a negative way, but name-checking Candace Owens, a black conservative, someone very much on the mainstream right. And immediately the press has started trying to link her in to this, saying she's triggering people. If she has triggered the killer, then it's because she is a black conservative and he doesn't like those. So why is she seen as an enabler? See, he's worked this all out. He knows how the mainstream media, the blue checkmark brigade, the progressive left think, and he's played them. He's totally played them, and he's playing some people on the mainstream right and in the centre as well. Now, he expresses in the manifesto his admiration for communist China, even though he's supposed to be a right-wing terrorist. And this is where the kind of horseshoe theory comes in. I know it's been discredited, but I still hold with the horseshoe theory of politics. And that when you get to the extreme right, you are almost within handshaking distance of the extreme left. The methodology of attaining power, suppressing dissent, controlling society, controlling the individuals and their thoughts and their speech, very similar. There's perhaps on the extreme right far more racism, overt racism and racial superiority than on the extreme left. Not that the extreme left is not immune to racism itself, but it tends not to hold with racial purity theories. That's one thing that divides them. But in terms of authoritarianism, in terms of anti-freedom, in terms of intolerance, there is a lot of similar ground. So this is where this killer, as I said, he is using the buzz phrases of internet culture. He's done his research. He has planned this meticulously. And as expected, what happens is the progressive left starts saying this is to blame. Inanimate objects, as usual. These guns are to blame. The rise of alternative media is to blame. These personalities are to blame. That's what the killer counted on. He counts on the usual voices being triggered. And of course, what is going to be the right's response? Don't take away our freedom. Don't take away our platform. Don't take away our guns. Yeah, they're going to fall into this tension. Now, for somebody who wants to start a civil war, he's going about it very well. He's got people rallying around their ideological marker points. So with someone who has made their intentions quite clear about what they're doing and why they're doing it and what results they expect to see, you would think a response from mainstream media and the commentariat is to not indulge in this game, not to start looking for things and people to blame. But unfortunately, this is what's unfolding, particularly on the left. The left are now saying this white right-wing extremism, terrorism, needs to be combated. And some of the responses are falling predictably along authoritarian lines. Already, we've had people such as law professors at the University of East Anglia who say the actions in Christchurch can be linked to Trump, to Brexit, to Nigel Farage, to Douglas Murray, to Tommy Robinson. And all the names, Rod Liddell, Melanie Phillips, all these names, Katie Hopkins. There you go, there's another one. All these people are somehow, in his mind, linked to the Christchurch killings. And it's going on from there. Brexit. It's the same, that this hatred that drove this man to commit these crimes is from the same wellspring as Brexit. The links are being made, even though they are not rational, they're not honest, and they are not accurate. This has nothing to do with Brexit. It has nothing to do with the mainstream right and the right-leaning and centrist commentariat. Neither is this a result of the alternative media. This killer has used the systems that have emerged. He used 4chan, 8chan, because that's where discussion happens. I do not think that this person was radicalized by contact on 4chan, 8chan, Gab, Dissenter, and all these other platforms. I think what you will find, once more facts emerge, that there's something going back deeper into the person's psyche, his upbringing. This links back to Carl Panzram, who you shouldn't be surprised if when you find out about his whole attitude to the murders and the rapes that he committed, that he himself was incredibly brutalized from childhood to become the man that he did. It's the same with Charles Manson. It's the same with the Columbine killers. There is something deep within, something psychological, something linked to the home front, linked to lived experience that drives these people into their misanthropic and nihilistic ambitions and what they then go ahead and do. But when I say we, I mean the commentariat in general and the media and the kind of torch-wielding mobs that form can only think of the recent things going on in their life. There's something, they would have been normal had they not had access to guns. They would have been normal had they not played violent video games. They would have been normal had they not joined in these kind of alternative, edgy discussion forums where there is just no rules on what you can say. These total free speech zones. It's free speech that must be the problem. And that is a complete misreading. Now, why would they be doing this? Why would somebody who is an academic, like this chap at UEA, make such these baseless and unfounded allegations? Why would people use this tragedy as a reason to silence Ben Shapiro, which is being discussed, or Candace Owens, or PewDiePie? Why? Why, when PewDiePie has released a statement saying how sickened he is by this whole thing, and that he has expressed his condolences to the survivors, people who have suffered in this tragedy. Because that's not honest, because can't people see the trick the murderer has played? Well, the thing is that in the minds of the mainstream media, they've got this going on. On the one hand, they know that if they go ahead and start this kind of the witch hunt, the finger pointing, the blame game, the calls to ban, censor, silence people, that they're playing into the killer's hands, that they're being tricked by the killer. Because the killer has said that this is what he wants to do. He wants to start this descent. So they can see that on the one hand. But on the other hand, here is an opportunity to take PewDiePie off the public radar. Which do you do? Do you thwart the killer? Or do you say, okay, maybe we can use this to our advantage? And this is what I think the chap at the University of East Anglia and all the other blue checkmark people and all the commentariat on the progressive left are doing. That they're seeing an opportunity to push home their agenda of silencing opposition. And I think the mainstream media will see an opportunity to put a stranglehold on alternative media. Because when you on one level you can say, oh look, it's just a bunch of sort of over emotional, not very bright liberals on Twitter who are just wielding pitchforks and torches and saying ban them, censor them, stop this. What does it matter at the end of the day? Well, when their voices are heard, when they make these kind of demands for censorship, who's listening to them? Okay, who with influence is listening to them? And I would suggest that they will make such a noise that private companies, social media platforms, academic institutions, governments, the media will listen more to this outraged mob rather than the voices of those urging for calm and restraint, and not to give the killer what he wants. They will listen. My worry is that they will listen to the mob and the deplatformings, the censorship, the loss of civil liberties, the tightening up of laws that we didn't need because we already had decent laws about inciting physical violence against people and about libel. We don't need all these extra hate laws. We'll probably get more hate laws, hate speech laws, and interpretations of what constitutes hate speech will change again. The fact that even Chelsea Clinton, who is critical of, I forget her name, is it Representative Omar of Minnesota? She was critical of her, Chelsea Clinton, so she gets abuse. So she can be seen as a racist or Islamophobic. That word Islamophobic will get a new definition in the days and weeks to come. It will probably encompass anyone who is critical of Islam, people who raise doubts, people who express worries about certain aspects of Islam, people who raise fears about what has happened in Rotherham and Luton, amongst other places. If you criticise, if you dare question it, you'll be seen as Islamophobic and repercussions will follow. And this is all what the killer wanted. He wanted an authoritarian state where factions are at each other's throat. He wants this kind of civil war, all of us at each other's throats, leading to destruction, so that in time his far-right white supremacist group will emerge from the ashes of all this and lay claim to the world. But in the meantime, he is counting on various factions being at war with each other. So this is a point I'm going to make. I'm going to directly address anybody from the progressive left who is watching this, is, are you going to rise to this killer's bait? Or are you going to say, look, I'm going to get a grip on things, PewDiePie is not responsible, Candace Owens isn't responsible, Douglas Murray, Ben Shapiro, just the right in general. Brexit is not responsible. And are we going to actually pursue the truth? Are we going to look at his manifesto? Are we going to look at his court case as he gets charged and it goes to court? Any testaments that he makes from now on? Are we going to look into his background, his private life, what he'd been up to? Are we going to do this with any honesty, or are we going to do it with our political agendas sharpened and to the forefront? And on that note, I'm not going to be flippant and say this takes the biscuit, because it does. So hopefully something a little bit more cheery will come along in the next 7 days. Good night.